All right, so today's exciting topic, conversational UX. And as usual, I got Bob and his goofy friends to help me out. So, quick motivation, natural interfaces becoming pretty big, big trend, moving away from GUIs into free flow systems like Alexa, Cortana, Google Assistant, Siri, specifically free flow as in like free flow text, voice, things like that. And the reason why they're kind of becoming more prevalent is they improve user experience, mainly because they reduce learning time. So because they're more natural, the user can adopt it faster and start using the system faster. Just keeping in mind that the user doesn't get any value from learning the system, they get value from like actually using the system. So if we can reduce the learning time and get them to actually start using the system faster, they can start getting value out of it faster, right? So before I kind of show a quick demo what that means, conversation design versus process design, what's the big difference, right? And process design tends to be a lot more structured. Every textbook out there, talks about like the token moving through the system, XOR gate, AND gate, timing event, but ultimately the token gets to the end, and the structure comes from that sequence, that step 1, step 2, step 3, that order. It has to be in order. Otherwise, the system kind of like breaks down. Conversation tends to be like very fluid, very dynamic. I can start talking about stuff like Belgian waffles and syrup and deliciousness. And why do I do that? Well, just to show that I don't have to finish my sentence to move into a different theme. So conversational design tends to be a little bit more thematic, and the way we start approaching designing it is, instead of like process design where I identify a series of steps and then sequence them, conversation design, I start identifying informational asymmetries between the user and the system in this case, and start correcting those through dialogue, through that informational exchange back and forth, back and forth. And I think Isaac Williams has a really good way of phrasing it and kind of grounding it in the idea of knowledge management. And that his dialogue is about invoking insight, which is a way of reordering our knowledge. And I'll kind of give an indication of what that is here shortly in the demo. So let's actually design a quick conversation. So Bob can look up stock price information. And that's what he's going to help me do today. And I'm the user. I'm a novice. I'm not the designer. I don't know what Bob can do. And system is Bob. So a couple of things we have to identify is, what are the informational asymmetries here? What is deficiency? What do I need to know as a user, and what does Bob needs to know about me in order for him to help me look up some stocks? So let's start with the user. Let's start with me. So as a user, number one, I need to know that stock functionality exists. Right? So I need to be able to know that Bob can help me do that task. Otherwise, how do I know to ask him that, right? And then the second one is, we'll put data format. So I need to know, like, how do I need to input the data into Bob in order for me to get, what I want, which is the stock price information. Okay. So now, what does the system needs to know about me as the user, right? And the very first thing is user intent. So the system actually needs to know, like Bob needs to know that I want to look up stock prices. As a user, just because I come up to Bob and I start interacting with him doesn't mean I want to look up stocks, right? And the second thing is, he needs to know company ticker. Company ticker. The ticker is that like the letter abbreviation that they use in financial markets. But that's the format that he needs the data in. So I cannot come in and say, I want to look up stock price of Facebook and spell out the word Facebook. It will break down. I need to put in FB, which is the ticker for Facebook, as an example. So he needs to know what the company ticker I want to look up. So how does that like play out in a conversation now that we've identified these informational requirements on both sides, and how do we link them together into these sort of sequence of steps, but not really. So let's do it live. We got Armenian Bob. So I come up and I say, what can you do to initiate the conversation, right? So as a user now, I'm starting to become more aware. So what does he do? He fulfills my knowledge gap, which is I don't know the functionality. So he tells me here that he can do stock price lookup. So now as a user, that's fulfilled. Okay. So I tell Bob back, I say, let's look up stock prices. So now, as from the system's perspective, what happened was I fulfilled his knowledge gap. He knows my intent. I intend to look up stock price information, right? So I did not tell him the ticker number because as a user, as a novice user, I don't know that this is what he needs. He just said he can look up stocks. And I said, sure, why not? Tell me some stuff, right? So he responds back, and this is where conversation design kind of like plays out. Because as a designer, I had to think through it and say, okay, well, if the user doesn't know that he needs to submit ticker into the system, When he makes this request, the system needs to elicit that information by letting the user know the formatting of the data that he needs to input into the system. In this case, it sounds real simple, but it's the ticker price, and that's what he says. What is the company ticker? He says it very simply. I'm probably over-explaining it, but from design perspective, you have to kind of like think through it, because if I just made that conversational message say, what's the company name? The user would probably type in Facebook and spell out Facebook, and then the system would break down, right? So he fulfilled that. So now as a user, I know what format the data needs to be in. So let's say we do look up price of Facebook, FB. So before I click that, there's a couple of things that are going to happen. So number one, I'm going to fulfill this requirement. And then there's something else that's going to happen. Let's take a look. So I type that in. He's going to tell me what the Facebook price is. As of today, apparently it's $331.79. And finally, I got the value. I got that step. And that's a very important part to realize, because that value proposition is kind of difficult to see sometimes. But that was the exchange. The final step was the step that the user actually got the value. Those steps that leading up to it, that stock functionality, user intent, company ticker, data format, back and forth, those were a cost. As a user, I did not get any value until I got to the final step. And that's very important to realize. But before we kind of sail off into the process design altogether, somebody might say like, well, you know, how is that different than process design? You just went step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, right? Okay, and this is where conversation design kind of shines a little bit. Now imagine this scenario. Imagine tomorrow I come up to Bob, and now as a user, I'm more knowledgeable. I'm more aware of what the system functionality is. I already know that he can look up stock price information, right? I already know that he can, that the format the data needs to be in is a ticker. So let's say tomorrow I come into Bob and I say, I want to look up price of Apple. I think it's APL. Hopefully that works. So what just happened? The conversation got collapsed. It was a dynamic experience. The system accommodated for a user with a different knowledge base. I, as a user, just did it in one step. It was a clean experience. And this is where conversation design kind of a lot different than process design. In a process design, I would still have to go through all those steps and have that like tacky kind of a clunky experience. In conversation design, and ultimately what people call like AI enhanced customer experiences, I just had a clean, crisp, lean experience. I just came up, I already knew what I want as a user. And I told the system, I said, tell me the price of Apple. And it just did just that. And now I can move on with my life. And there is no fuss, no mess, no nothing else. And I'll talk more about conversation collapses and expansions later on. But the big thing to highlight, this is what conversational design is all about. This is what why it's becoming so prevalent and why people are kind of looking into it more, because it allows you to tailor that customer experience that one step further. So not only is the user now logged in and we got their profile information, but we can look at their knowledge base, their competence, their ability to use technology, because not everybody's proficient. Not everybody's a tech whiz out there. Some people have a hard time. Some people are averse. So if we can tailor that experience to them one step further, it's even more valuable. They even have more of a delightful user experience. And that's why the bedrock of like conversation design ultimately, and why it's kind of cool, because there's a lot of these things that you're mixing together and you're pushing that envelope. You're pushing that one step further. But before I completely sail off into the sunset of conversation design and why and all these possibilities that become available, and all this value you can create for your customers, there are limitations, as everything else. So number one, it requires specialized skill set. And what I'm showing is just like some guy read some research and like, messing around. But specialized skill set requires like people who are psychology focused, people who are linguistics focused, conversational analysis, IT professionals, of course. So it's a lot harder to find those skill sets. Increasing variance, when I put free flow stuff, it's a lot more varied. I can start using synonyms. I'm being nice to Bob right now. I'm not mistyping words. I'm not using synonyms. I'm not restructuring my sentences into question format. or all sorts of other things that I can just start messing with him and then he'll probably break down. So there's a need to kind of simulate that and account for it and manage it appropriately. So variance management, it's not variance minimization like process design, it's not Lean Six Sigma, it's variance management, and it's kind of a difficult thing to do. Which ultimately increases complexity, increases development time, increases maintenance cost, because you're gonna have to hire professional folks that understand these things to manage these systems. Like Amazon doesn't just have like one guy managing Alexa, they have like probably a department full of people over there. And then the last one is it's kind of difficult to measure the benefit, that marginal gain. Like how much better is it? It's difficult to measure, it's difficult to quantify because it's kind of like this abstract topic of user experience. Like how much more benefit, how much more value, how much more money did the company make because the user experience is a little bit better? Like how do we measure that? So that's some of the limitations that companies would have to figure out in order to really dive into this kind of a phenomenon, I guess, if you will. So that's it for today. I'm kind of over time a little bit, 11 minutes. But as we'll move forward, I'll kind of show how to manage some of these complexities, such as variance, and how to get more value, and how to mess with Bob so we can start messing with him a little bit. Thanks for watching.